Hey folks, Mark Levin here. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to talk about my go-to gold and silver company. Monetary Gold has over 25 years helping Americans understand physical gold and silver with an education-first, no-pressure approach and support for IRA-eligible options. Monetary Gold has a complimentary guide. It's free to help you understand precious metals. Call them right now, 877-NOW-GOLD, or visit marklovesgold.com and request the free guide. Make sure to ask for details. That's 877-NOW-GOLD, or visit marklovesgold.com. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax consultant. Now let's get to the show.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. We have a special guest. I don't believe I've ever interviewed Steve Witkoff, as a matter of fact. Steve Witkoff, how are you, sir?
Very good, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I wanted to have you on the program because you have some information. You touched on it on Hannity last night as well, about your experience, Jared Kushner's experience in dealing with this Iranian regime before the president decided it was time to pull the trigger. Can you fill us in on this?
Well, first of all, Mark, the president sent me and Jared in because he wanted to really determine if it was possible to make a deal that they would sign, right? Not just agree to, but that they would sign, and that could be enforced. And so we went back and we began the session in Oman. We were in Muscat. And, we had two other meetings with them in Geneva. And I would say that they wanted to report a lot of positivity. And Jared and I, from almost the go, were suspect as to whether they would really do the type of deal that would be acceptable to President Trump. And we turned out, I think, to be right.
So the first meeting, you never met face-to-face, I take it. Is that correct?
No, we met face-to-face.
Okay.
The bosses back in Tehran had said that they couldn't do it direct. The foreign minister from Oman, Badr Busati, was the mediator. So we met at... I want to say, I can't remember, it might have been his home, but we met at his home, and, they were very gracious. Arachi and his team, his deputy and some other people were in another room, but they came and joined, after they had some conversation directly with the Omanis, they came and joined Jared and I in the room, and that's where we had direct conversation with them. I remember the first meeting, Mark, that we had in Muscat. At some point, very, very, very early in the conversation, Arachi laid down the marker by saying enrichment is considered to be, by his leadership, Iran's inalienable right. That sort of began it. At that point, we began discussing the material. All of the enriched material that they had been stockpiling. It's close to 10,000 kilograms, by the way. And at some point during this interview, I'll take you through the breakdown of it all. But they began discussing it, and Jared was a witness to this. They were talking about the 60% enriched material, which is roughly 460 kilograms. And to get to weapons grade, which is 90% for a bomb, you're about a week, maybe 10 days away when you're at 60%. So they've got all this material at 60%, and it's a obvious concern to us. And he knew it. And he said to us, you know, and I know, and the Europeans know because they attest to it, that's 11 bombs. So that's why this material is so important to you. And I've described that as them being proud that they held it, that this was something of a trophy that they had. And there's no doubt in my mind that that's how they thought about it, about that material. But let me tell you one last point about that first meeting, because it's sort of fascinating. As we were talking about all the material, and the material includes roughly 8,000 kilograms of enriched material at 3.67%, another 1,000 kilograms at 20%, which is a story unto itself, and then roughly 460 kilograms at 60. We were talking. But
let me just say this. Let me say this, Steve, for the audience. A kilogram, I just looked it out, is 2.2 pounds. Go ahead. I'm sorry. That's right.
So they have in total around 10,000 kilograms, which is 24,000 pounds of enriched uranium that was never intended to be used, Mark, for civil purposes, and that could only do one thing. It could only be stockpiled in a move towards weaponization. It's the only reason why you would have it. But let me give you a telltale sign, because part of the reason we were there for the president was not just to negotiate. We were negotiating, but we were there to give the president an honest read on what we felt their motivations were and whether they would do a deal that was enforceable. So I'm going to read you what I wrote down at that first meeting as to what they said to us. Their lead negotiator, the foreign minister from Iran, said the following, talking about giving up the material. Why would we will? Oh, here it is. We will not give you at the negotiating table what you could not win militarily in Midnight Hammer.
Jeez. So wasn't going to give it up.
He didn't say Midnight Hammer because that's our right. Word. We named it. So he didn't say that. But he basically said, we're just not going to hand it over to you. Now here we were, with ships in the region. We were posturing for all the right reasons. It's peace through strength. It's the only way you're going to get them to the table. Without that, they were never going to be at the table. And we're there presumably because they're in a tough spot and they're going to be compromising and elastic. And yet you hear these, what I'll call maximalist statements. We're not going to give you at the negotiating table what you couldn't win militarily. And I remember thinking to myself, this pretty much foreshadows how they're going to be. And it was that set that in my view, and there were plenty of other alerts to us, but this was, remember, the first meeting, Mark.
So to be clear, we had this first meeting. They had over a ton of this fissile material, over a ton. That's what you said, 2,400 pounds. And they're telling you it's off the table.
No, it's more than that. We have
more?
10,000 kilograms. It's 10,000 times 2.2.
Oh, my God. 24,000.
Correct.
And they said that's off the table in the first meeting.
Now, Mark, it's different. We were negotiating to get it back, but they were making statements about how this was a trophy piece. We had to consider that. Look, I remember saying to the negotiators from Oman and others who had called us up hoping for a diplomatic solution, and I remember saying, not dissimilar to the days of Hamas when we negotiated the release of the hostages, and in particular, Edan Alexander. When we were sitting at the table with Hamas, who were, in my view, in some respects, more reasonable than these guys, I remember negotiating...
Hold on. Hamas was more reasonable than these guys. I just want to underscore that.
I'm not, by the way, I'm not saying they're reasonable people.
I got that. Yeah.
Contextually more reasonable than what we experienced here. And when I say that, I mean the following. We presented the arguments for Edan Alexander being released. And he was the last American that was being held captive who was alive. There were two other Americans who had died. We were waiting to get their bodies back, but he was alive. We wanted to get him out alive. And I said to... I remember talking to Hamas, me and Jared, and saying, you should do this. You'll build some degree of political capital with the president. And guess what? They did it. Mm-hmm. And there were things or accommodations that we made later on for them in consideration of that. And I remember saying to the Omanis, with regard to the material that they were holding, they should turn it over to us. If they profess that they have no bad intentions here, if they profess that they no longer possess the ability to enrich, if that is truly and genuinely how they feel, then why would they need the material? Mm-hmm. They should hand it over as an act of goodness, and that would set the tone for how this negotiation would be. And I think that you would see President Trump as the sort of man who would acknowledge that, right? He would acknowledge that, that was that's a statesman-like move. And they were just not interested in that. That would have been good advice for them to take, but they just weren't at that place to take it. And I think in large part, it's because how their system works. They had a supreme leader. They had one. Everything, it's really like a sort of intractable environment over there. You could see that their negotiators just did not have flexibility, or they weren't delegated the authority to make decisions on the spot. And President Trump gave me and Jared a wide berth, to negotiate this deal. He delegates well. I don't think he gets enough credit for delegating well.
Now, Steve, I know you need to go, but I'm not going to let you go. I need one more segment with you. Tell whoever's dragging you away. I want you to stay on.
I'm not trying to leave you.
No, I have to take a break. I have to take a break.
Oh, okay.
So don't forget where you left off, because this is really important and very intriguing, as far as I'm concerned, to get this story out to the American people. I'm talking to Steve Witkoff, the go-to envoy with Jared Kushner, and we will be right back.
Mark Levin.
Some major U.S. banks are publishing aggressive gold scenarios for 2026, some as high as about $6,300 an ounce. While nothing about the future is guaranteed, the market has already moved faster than many expected. Meanwhile, central banks have been accumulating gold, and some estimates show that gold holdings now exceeding U.S. Treasury holdings, signaling gold's long-term confidence. Monetary gold has over 25 years helping Americans understand physical gold and silver. With an education-first, no-pressure approach and support for IRA-eligible options, Monetary Gold has a complimentary guide to help you understand precious metals. Call them right now, 877-NOW-GOLD, or visit marklovesgold.com. Request the free guide. Make sure to ask for details. That's 877-NOW-GOLD, or visit marklovesgold.com. marklovesgold.com. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional. All right, we got Steve Witkoff. I want to move quickly. We only have 4 minutes in this segment, but Steve has agreed to go after the break, which is great. So, Steve, pick it up where you left off.
And where was I, Mark?
You pretty much came to the end of the first meeting. They had enormous amount of this material. They basically said, we're proud of it. Then you have a second meeting. How did that go?
I would say the second meeting was, a little bit more purposeful than the first meeting, but because we got them to agree to present to us some sort of agreement, because we were wide apart on the first meeting. We were just wide apart. They were not coming there to prepared to. I would have hoped that they were coming there with concrete proposals, like come and pick up the material a week from today, and we'll turn that over as an act of good faith. And then let's have a discussion about enrichment. But it was nothing like that. So the second meeting, we ended with an agreement for them to send an agreement, which they promised we would get 5 to 6 days after that second meeting ended. And this is another data point. We never received it until the third meeting, which they never even, and by the way, and they never gave us the agreement on the third meeting. They let us read it. And that's a whole story, unto itself as well. But I want to say this, Mark. I just read something online about the Iranian negotiator saying something about, relatively nasty about Jared and I, saying that, depicting us as, calling us, saying that we engaged in quote unquote diplomatic treachery, that we were not there to make a deal. We were, maybe duping them in some way. And I'll tell you something. It's interesting that he writes that, because that's exactly how we saw what they were doing. Mm-hmm. They were pretending to negotiate. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
And they kept talking about great progress being made.
They said it. Notice.
Yeah, they did.
We were not signed. We were never signed on to a statement about great progress, ever. Mm-hmm. We refused to sign it because we weren't making great progress. And in fact, we complained about the progress. What we did was we pointed at the ships that were out there, symbolically, metaphorically, and said, they're here for a reason. They're here because that's peace through strength. That's President Trump's policies. Mm-hmm. And you need to sort of get on the ball, and we need to get this finished in some way. But the word is obfuscating. They were obfuscating the entire time. And I remember thinking to myself, they hide their nuclear activities. They lock Rafael Grossi from the IEA out, so he hasn't been able to make an inspection since Midnight Hammer. They hide their ballistic missiles in places that are difficult to find out where they are, and yet they talk about us as being not genuine and purposeful. And it's actually what they accuse us of is exactly what they are doing. And we'll probably get to not this piece of it, but in the next segment we'll get to it. Tehran research reactor, because not only have they systematically hidden their activities on ballistic missile production and on nuclear, but they've hidden what Tehran research reactor was actually doing.
All right, let's hold right there. The research reactor. We're going to pick it up right there, Steve. And we really appreciate your time and how forthcoming you are and what took place. So we'll be right back with Steve Witkoff. Some major U.S. banks are publishing aggressive gold scenarios for 2026, some as high as about $6,300 an ounce. While nothing about the future is guaranteed, the market has already moved faster than many expected. Meanwhile, central banks have been accumulating gold, and some estimates show that gold holdings now exceeding U.S. Treasury holdings, signaling gold's long-term confidence. Monetary gold has over 25 years helping Americans understand physical gold and silver with an education-first, no-pressure approach and support for IRA-eligible options. Monetary Gold has a complimentary guide to help you understand precious metals. Call them right now, 877-NOW-GOLD, or visit marklovesgold.com. Request the free guide. Make sure to ask for details. That's 877-NOW-GOLD, or visit marklovesgold.com. marklovesgold.com. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional.
Mark the Thin, the thunder on the right. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you're getting an inside view of one of the principals who was negotiating with the Iranian regime, Steve Witkoff. We do appreciate your time, Steve, so I want to be quiet and let you go on. This research facility, and then the third meeting, the final meeting, and then, if you're allowed to, and I don't want you to breach anything, what you told the president.
Okay, so Mark, first let me take a step back. This is all sort of around the third meeting, but leading up to the third meeting, we also saw signs that made us feel that they were being disingenuous. They promised an agreement at the second meeting that we would get 5 days after. We never got it. We asked for it continuously. You can't work on these things unless you have some sort of paper that you can, there it is, palpable on the paper. We can have a discussion about it. They refused to give us the agreement at the third meeting, but they'd let us peruse it, which was not acceptable. In any event, let me get into, because the third meeting involved TRR, because it was discovered. TRR stands for Tehran Research Reactor. There are industrial grade reactors, and there are research reactors. Esfahan, Natanz, Fordow, which were enrichment facilities, and so forth. They were all enriching at an industrial grade level. Those were all wiped out during the Midnight Hammer operation, and one of the deal points here was for all of those facilities to be decommissioned and permanently shut down, because they had no use but to make enriched material and have it stockpiled for later use. There was no civilian use attached to it. We had talked to the Iranians for a long time about doing something called the Civil 123 nuclear program, where they could have all the nuclear they wanted, but they couldn't enrich it. It would be bought from the outside, from whether it's us, the Russians, the French. It's readily available, and countries like Abu Dhabi are running Civil 123 programs for their own internal needs. A civil needs mean that you're generally enriching to 3.67%. In a 123 program, you're not doing the enriching because you're buying it from an outside purveyor. But the fuel is being delivered at 3.67%. A research reactor, like Tehran Research Reactor, must enrich, because it's a research reactor to do radioisotopes. Radioisotopes require, as an ingredient for the process, enrichment of nuclear fuel at 20%. 20% is roughly 5.5 times 3.67%, which is that level needed for civil use to provide electricity and so forth. So that's 5 times the level of the JCPOA at 20%. Now, for quite some time, everyone on this earth was under the assumption that TRR was enriching at 20% because they were genuinely producing radioisotopes for the betterment of Iranian society. those radioisotopes to be used for making medicines, cancer research, agricultural research to make more efficient crops, things of that sort. And when they gave us this agreement in the third session, about 7 pages, and they let me read it, and I wouldn't tell you I'm an expert in nuclear, but I've learned quite a bit, and I've studied it and read quite a bit about it, and I'm competent to sit at the table and discuss it, and Jared is as well. We read the agreement, and what did we figure out? We figured out that they wanted to do other research reactors, and the reason they wanted those other research reactors is because the enrichment there starts at the 20% level, 5 times more than JCPOA. And then we saw embedded in their flow chart as to what they needed is that they had consumed all of their fuel at TRR, when in fact they had not. The IEA had evidence that they were stockpiling there, and they had enough fuel to run TRR for the next 7 or 8 years without any additional fuel being delivered. So
what were they doing?
The IEA, they were stockpiling again at the 20% level. Why? By labeling it a research reactor, they got to begin enrichment at 20% with no intention of using it for radioisotopes. They did an experiment here or there to sort of keep up the deception, but basically they were enriching at 20. And why? Because maybe it's a month and a half from 20 to 90, which is weapons grade. At 60%, it's a week to 10 days. But 20 gives you a big head start over 3.67. So effectively, what we figured out in the third meeting is that their agreement proposed, based on quote unquote what they claim were Iran's needs, their agreement proposed enrichment potentially at 5 times north of where the JCPOA had capped them. It would begin for these research reactors at 20. And it was clear that this was a subterfuge. There was no mistaking it. And they got called out at the table by Rafael Grossi from the IEA, who said, clearly, you're not doing what you've claimed you've been doing at TRR, which is enriching for radioisotopes. We know you're not doing it because all the fuel is stockpiled, so you haven't been burning anything.
What they said.
And that was Mark almost the Perry Mason moment.
And what did they say when you caught them right there at the table?
They really didn't have an answer. Certainly not a satisfactory answer. And as we began to explore this plan at the table, we were reading it and we're not telling them what we're seeing at the time. We discussed it a little bit after, but we really wanted to report the results. Honestly, it led us to absolutely conclude that they weren't just hiding what they were doing with enrichment. They weren't just hiding what they were doing with their ballistic assets, which they're very, very good at making, but they were disguising a research and development program from a nuclear standpoint that they sold as being helpful to their people. And it was anything but that. It was intended to be stockpiled, and you have to presume that meant it was going towards
Steve, let me ask you a few quick questions, because you're going to have to go soon. Let me ask you a few quick questions. So they really were deceiving you, or attempting to, from day one, correct?
Correct.
And all this talk about progress that they were putting out there, even now they say, we don't know why they hit us. We were making progress. It's all BS, isn't it?
Well, it's BS, and let me tell you why it's BS, Mark. Because the only way they were going to get credit was they needed to come back and tell their leaders that they got the best of Jared and I. That was the whole point. They wanted, if they wanted to make progress, it was very easy for them to make progress, and let me tell you what I mean. And this is the last Perry Mason moment. Jared and I walked out of the room, we came back in, we decided we were going to offer them something. We said, what if we were to give you a program where you have no enrichment for 10 years, none, All the fuel will be supplied by outside purveyors. We'll see if we can get permission for this. We suggested, and we'll pay for all the fuel. And their answer to us was no. We don't need your money, and we don't need our dignity to be assaulted by you suggesting you need to pay something for us, which essentially meant we have no desire to run a civil nuclear program because everything is about disguising what our real motivations are, enriching, and have the flexibility to enrich. Imagine in a world where Donald Trump is not president. They've got 60% material. They get their hands on even a World War II vintage weapon, which is not hard to do. And boom, they break out with 60% and 20% enriched levels. And it takes them at most a week to 10 days on the 60. That's 11 bombs. And on the 20, which is another 1,000 kilograms, it takes them maybe a month or a month and a half. And that would add, another 25 bombs? Imagine them being able to break out that fast because no one was really paying attention to what they were doing. And in effect, by the way, the IEA wasn't able to pay attention for the last 10 or 11 months.
Because they cut them out. All right, let me ask you this.
Which was another sign, because if you're innocent, why cut them out?
You're right. So you go back to the president, you say, Mr. President, it's hopeless, they're lying to us.
Well, I didn't say it was hopeless. I said, Mr. President, they're lying to us. There's no doubt. There are deceptions all over the place. The fingerprints are on it. I gave him all the examples. He's very focused on facts. We gave him all the facts. The facts are unassailable. So we gave it all to him. And, we talked about it quite a bit. We talked about what could be done. And, he had to make a decision, a very tough, consequential decision. And I like to say this, great men faced with great consequential problems, they make great decisions.
Yeah.
And that was one of them. And that was his thought. And he's one of them, and that was his choice to make.
One last question. Pretty much everything you're telling me, was this shared, at least generally, with this Gang of Eight by Rubio and others, explaining this situation, explaining what you came up against, explaining this to these members of Congress?
I don't know because I was not at the Gang of Eight meeting.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was explained exactly like this. But this is the exact. These are the exact set of facts that that depict what happened.
Yeah, but they had to know a lot, because when I saw Schumer come out, he didn't say, "Oh, this is ridiculous." He said, "The administration has to make the case," and of course, his base is so radical, there was no case to be made, and now they're talking. But now they're going to have the facts, certainly from you.
But let me say this. Jared and I, we all have one ultimate boss in the administration, and that's right. President Trump. But Jared and I really do see ourselves as an extension of the State Department, and we work integrally with Marco, who's an outstanding Secretary of State. We're very involved with John Radcliffe, with Pete Hegseth, with Dan Kane. We really, it's a collaborative effort. So while we weren't at the Gang of Eight, because I physically couldn't be there at the time, I'm sure that Marco, who is sensible, grounded, by the way, knows this set of facts because we report in religiously to the foreign policy team. I would imagine that they got a dose of it. And there's plenty more. If you had about another 10 segments for me tonight, then I could maybe get through 10 or 12% of it.
Well, you've given us a lot, and I think it's very important that this audience, which is quite massive, understands the extent to which the Iranian regime had no intention of making any deal, that they were deceiving you, they were hiding the ball, if you will, and that the concern tell me if I'm right, was they could break out very quickly, and you couldn't keep sitting around waiting for them to delay. They wouldn't even hand you a paper draft to look at. Correct?
That's correct. They let us read it, and we said to them, look, we have nuclear experts back in Washington. We have something called the CIA and the Department of War, and we need to assess these things. And they said, no, we can't give it to you. So think about it. You know, how earnest is someone who wants to make a deal and they don't want to give you the agreement to read and to share with your decision-making team? There were tells, Mark, the tells were so obvious, and they were just so often. And the positivity they talk about was that they put down on a piece of paper, and we got it the first day we were there, 2 paragraphs of, we profess that we do not want a weapon. We profess that we will not use nuclear for anything but civil purposes and the betterment of our society. It was 2 paragraphs of that. And look, if you're going to stick with that, it's commendable, but then you got to stand by the words. And none of their actions would lead you to believe that they were going to stand by the words.
And let me say this. I've been tough on you, not lately. And you've been doing a hell of a job, actually. And you've been serving the President of the United States, you and Jared. You follow his orders and his directives, and you try and deliver for him. I know that you've gone through health issues. I'm not going to get into it. I'm not going to reveal it. But you have, and yet then you go back, and you're dealing with some of the world's, I'll say, the scum of the earth. And so, and you're dealing with these particular people. One last question. We only have 30 seconds. Were these the worst to deal with than anybody you've dealt with so far?
I think they were the most. Yeah, look, there's a lot of difficulty out there, but these were the most. These were the most disingenuous. But I will tell you this: we kept on going back and trying, Mark, because the president asked us to, and he is the greatest president ever, and you know, we follow his lead. He is the commander in chief for a reason. He's just, you know, and by the way, it makes me proud to talk about him, and I know it makes you proud in the same way. Mm-hmm. We're lucky to have him at the helm.
Amen. I can sleep well at night. And what you're telling me, Steve, is, look, I'm not a cowboy. I'm doing what I'm asked to do, and I'm doing it for the President of the United States. I get it. Jared, too. This is fascinating. We're going to, we've been recording it, right, Mr. Producer? We're going to put it out there also on the internet so the whole world knows what it is you were dealing with, which is real, pure evil. Steve Witkoff, best to you and your family. God bless, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too. Take care of yourself. There you have it. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Some major U.S. banks are publishing aggressive gold scenarios for 2026, some as high as about $6,300 an ounce. While nothing about the future is guaranteed, the market has already moved faster than many expected. Meanwhile, central banks have been accumulating gold, and some estimates show that gold holdings now exceeding U.S. Treasury holdings, signaling gold's long-term confidence. Monetary gold has over 25 years helping Americans understand physical gold and silver. With an education-first, no-pressure approach and support for IRA-eligible options, Monetary Gold has a complimentary guide to help you understand precious metals. Call them right now, 877-NOW-GOLD, or visit marklovesgold.com. Request the free guide. Make sure to ask for details. That's 877-NOW-GOLD, or visit marklovesgold.com. marklovesgold.com. Performance may vary. You should always consult your financial and tax professional. Well, you've learned more information than has ever been revealed before. It's not secret, but Steve Witkoff hasn't had the opportunity to lay it out. You know, TV, it's boom, 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 boom. Other radio shows, boom, 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 and they're looking for, you know, hot hits. I like to get the story out. And there's a lot more there, obviously. But you heard what he said. First meeting, second meeting, third meeting, that they were developing additional material for nuclear weapons. They had already violated the deal that they had signed with Obama, and they were still supposed to uphold that deal, even though we got out of it because of the Europeans and the United Nations, and that they were deceptive from day one all the way through the process. They didn't even have authority, really, to make any conclusions. They wouldn't give them an actual draft of a proposal to take back to the Pentagon and the CIA and our nuclear experts, and they were just hiding the ball, hiding the ball, hiding the ball. And this is what I think people mean by a breakout, as he was pointing out repeatedly. At 60%, it takes a week to 10 days, and we've discussed this technology before. It takes a week to 10 days to have the material for a bomb. And obviously, the president was very worried about that. And obviously, the president got the information from Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner that this was unmovable, that these guys didn't call the shot, that the supreme leader really had no interest in the deal, while at the same time their foreign minister was going all over TV saying, great progress, great progress, great progress, when in fact there was no progress because of them. This segment of the podcast is exclusively sponsored by Pure Talk. Pure Talk offers great coverage and can save your family money on your wireless bill every single month. Go to puretalk.com to find the plan that's right for you. Thank you again for listening, and thank you so much for this sponsorship, Pure Talk.
He's here. He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Wasn't that extraordinary? What we're going to do is we're going to make we have a recording of that. We are editing out the commercials and in the breaks. So we'll pull it all together, tighten it up, and we're going to put it out on our social media and elsewhere so the word can get out. Because the bottom line is the president had absolutely no choice. That's the truth. Now we'll see if platforms out there, news platforms, cable news, news networks are interested in the facts. I dare say most of them will not be. But that doesn't mean you can't share this information. I would also tell you that my video podcast has been very news-breaking, very, very important. It's called Liberty's Voice. We did our 7th episode today. It's all free. Marco pays for it all. You can go to Rumble and view it there. You can go to YouTube and view it there. At Rumble, you can follow us. At YouTube, you can subscribe, but you can view it at either location. Very important program today, and I hope you'll check it out. Over at Liberty's Voice, I want to thank Rumble, which has done a fantastic job. We'll thank YouTube, too, but Rumble has done a fantastic job. And I want to thank my executive producer, David, my producer, Josh, Westwood One, that is very supportive of this project. And we're just getting started, so it's really just a newborn baby. Other people have been doing this for years and years and years, so it takes a little time to build followers and listeners. But I want to encourage you folks to be among them at YouTube and Rumble. If you don't know how to use YouTube or Rumble, ask your family member, or just go into Google. It'll show you how to do it. But the program's called Liberty's Voice for a reason. I hope you'll take advantage of it because, again, it is intended to mesh with the radio program and the TV show to build up all the audiences on all the platforms and, all the different technologies to really build a juggernaut for the midterm elections so we can save this nation from what would be a horrible fate if the Democrats win the House and or the Senate. This is what we're going to do. We Thomas Paines. We Paul Revere's. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what your background is. You don't have to be a big shot. You don't have to be rich. You don't have to be any of those things. Just be interested. So please join us in this new endeavor. It's very important. Liberty's Voice at Rumble. You can follow us there. YouTube, subscribe. When I say subscribe, it's something I got to pay. You don't have to pay a thing. And you can just view us right there. We also have some of the best, I think, input in our social sites, because I'm working it hard these days because there's so much at stake. So on X, a.k.a. Twitter, we're on Facebook. Where else are we, Rich? I don't even know. TikTok, Instagram, Truth Social, of course. We're on all of them. All of them. So we've really expanded our reach. We think it's very, very important. I do. And there's a lot I want to get to tonight. But before I do, it's Purim. It's the Jewish holiday of Purim. And if you're Persian, you had a role in this. I'm going to read something to you. Written by a gentleman who is a Moroccan, a journalist, a Muslim, and he appears to be an all-around good guy. Adil Fawzi, writing in the Times of Israel. When the Mossad launched a Farsi-language telegram channel on Saturday morning, this Saturday morning, hours into Operation Roaring Lion, or what we call, the hell do we call it again? Fury. Epic Fury. And addressed Iranians as our brothers and sisters, quote unquote, promising that, quote, together we will return Iran to its glorious days. The predictable chorus erupted across Arab capitals and Western campuses alike. Who are the Jews to appoint themselves liberators of Iran? By what right does Israel, of all nations, presume to speak of freeing a people it has never governed and a land it has never occupied? Now, the objection sounds reasonable until you open a history book, at which point it collapses entirely. Because the relationship between Jews and Persians is not a geopolitical convenience manufactured in 2026. If you listen to the Jew haters, that's what they say. It is one of the oldest, deepest, most consequential alliances in the recorded history of civilization. And what Israel did on Saturday was not colonial arrogance, but the repayment of a debt that is 25 centuries old. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar II, destroyed Solomon's temple, the first temple, razed Jerusalem, and marched the Jewish people into exile. Babylonian captivity, one of the defining catastrophes of Jewish history. For 70 years, the Jewish nation existed in bondage, its holiest site in ruins, its people scattered across a foreign empire with no army, no sovereignty, no realistic hope of return. And then, in 539 BCE, Cyrus the Great, a Persian, not a Jew, conquered Babylon and issued the decree that altered the trajectory of Jewish civilization permanently. The Edict of Cyrus permitted the Jews to return to Jerusalem, to rebuild their temple, and reconstitute their national life in the land from which they had been torn. He didn't merely allow the return, he financed it, sending back the sacred vessels that Nebuchadnezzar had plundered and providing resources for reconstruction. The Hebrew Bible records the decree in terms so exalted that Cyrus remains to this day the only non-Jew ever referred to in Jewish scripture as Mashiach, God's anointed. The book of Isaiah, written before Cyrus was born, calls him by name and declares him chosen by God to liberate his people. No other Gentile figure in 3,000 years of Jewish literature occupies this position. The Persian king who freed the Jews is embedded in Jewish consciousness, not as a political ally, but a divine instrument, and the gratitude is not metaphorical. It is theological, liturgical, and civilizational. This was not a singular episode. The Persian-Jewish relationship extended across centuries under the Achaemenid dynasty. Darius I continued Cyrus's policies and contributed to the completion of the Second Temple in 515 BCE. The book of Esther, read aloud in every synagogue on Purim, records how Esther and Mordecai, operating within the Persian court of King Ahasuerus, foiled Haman's plot to exterminate every Jew in the empire. Do you know where Esther is buried, Mr. Producer? In Iran. The festival of Purim is, at its core, a celebration of Persian Jewish solidarity. A Jewish queen, trusted by a Persian king, intervening within the structures of Persian power to save her people from annihilation. That this strike fell on Purim, the very day Jews read the Megillah recounting how the last man who plotted Jewish destruction from Persian soil was himself destroyed, carried a symmetry so precise that for many in the Jewish world, it felt less like coincidence and more like the closing of a circle that history itself had drawn. And this is the point, that those who mock Israel's rhetoric of liberation either do not know or choose to ignore. Persians are not Arabs. The Persian relationship with the Jewish people has never been defined by the eliminationist hostility that characterized much of the Arab world's posture towards Jewish sovereignty. Iranians did not invade Israel in 1948. Iranians did not block the Straits of Tehran. Iranians did not chant for the destruction of the Jewish state in 1967. Under the Shah, Iran was one of the first Muslim-majority nations to recognize Israel, maintained full diplomatic relations, cooperated on intelligence and infrastructure, and hosted a thriving Jewish community that had existed continuously in Persia's soil for 27 centuries, one of the oldest Jewish diaspora communities in the world. The rupture came in 1979, and it was not the Iranian people who chose enmity toward the Jews. It was the theocratic regime that hijacked their revolution, imposed Shia Islamist ideology onto an ancient, pluralistic civilization, and adopted the Arab world's anti-Zionist vocabulary as a tool of domestic and regional control. The death to Israel chants were manufactured by a clerical establishment that needed an external enemy to justify internal repression, not by the heirs of Cyrus, who've been intermarrying with Jews, trading with Jews, and protecting Jews since before the Parthenon was built. This is why the Mossad's message resonated as deeply as it did among the Iranian diaspora, not because Iranians are naive about Israeli motives, but because they recognize in it something that the cynics could not see, an acknowledgement that the Iranian people are not their regime, that a civilization that produced Cyrus, Hafez, Ferdowsi, Rumi, and Alfacina cannot be reduced to the theocratic junta that censored their poetry, murdered their daughters for showing their hair, and turned their ancient nation into a pariah state, synonymous with enriched uranium and proxy warfare. When Netanyahu declared that the operation would create the conditions for the brave Iranian people to take their destiny into their own hands, quote unquote, he was not speaking the language of colonial imposition. He was speaking the language of a debt that stretches back to a clay cylinder in the British Museum, inscribed with the words of a Persian king who 25 centuries ago looked at a captive Jewish nation and said, "Go home, rebuild, and live." The Jews remember. And on Saturday, in the skies over Tehran, they began to repay. I thought you should know. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
It's time for a little spring cleaning, and I know where to start. Go drag your old, dated wireless contract out of the closet and beat it with a broom. Then freshen things up by switching to Pure Talk, my wireless company that gives you unlimited talk, text, and plenty of data, just $25 a month, with no contract, no cancellation fees, and no overseas customer service if you ever need help. I'm guessing you're going to like them as much as my listener, Paul, from Greer, South Carolina. He says, I finally listened to Mark Levin's advice and switched from Verizon. I'm getting the very same service for less than half of what I was paying Verizon. You know, I long wondered if these much lower services could provide the same level of service as the big boys. Now I know that Pure Talk certainly can. Thank you, Paul. Now it's time for you folks to make the switch, too. Go to puretalk.com/Levin, puretalk.com/Levin, and you'll save 50% off your first month. That's puretalk.com/Levin, and switch to a wireless company that shares your values. Pure Talk, America's wireless company. And now you know why the Persians and the Jews march in the street, carrying each other's flags, celebrating each other's cultures and people. It's a magnificent relationship, and now you know why that regime hijacked that country, hijacked its people, and used the resources in that country to try and destroy the Jewish state, first and foremost. I'm going to tell you something right now. There's two men who live today who are going to be remembered for thousands of years, like a King Cyrus. Benjamin Netanyahu will be remembered as the greatest leader of the Jews in modern times, period. Donald Trump will be remembered as one of the greatest leaders of the free world, period. For 1,000 years, 2,000 years, as long as humanity survives. We tell these stories of ancient history. We look in the Bible. These two men are that important. And they've proven themselves by the opposition they face domestically and internationally. The obstacles they've overcome in their own countries. The lack of appreciation for both of them. But history has a way of fixing things. These are two men who've aligned together to stop the annihilation of the world with nuclear weapons by a 7th century primitive barbaric ideology and regime. The Lilliputians, the everyday cheap politicians, are everyday cheap politicians. But when you step back and you look at it, what these men have been up against, people tried to destroy them. People still try to destroy them, try to kill them, try to put them in prison. And they rose up above it all. I believe God has a purpose. I really do. These men will be remembered for thousands of years. Thousands of years. And the rest of them won't be. This show is different from any show on radio, any show on TV, any podcast, any of it, because I think history is crucial to having a context for your thinking process. You go on the internet today, you're going to have a bunch of haters, vile people, throwing around slogans, calling people's names. We have a site on all these different social media platforms. And I insist on using them to get the word out, to fight these hostile elements, to promote our country and our belief system. I insist on it. I cannot let them devour these platforms and use them for horrible things. It's the same with video podcasting. We're really some of the most horrible people in the country, making enormous amounts of money. Because they've figured out that by being Jew haters, or Persian haters, or Christian haters, or race baiters, or bigots, or whatever they are, they have figured out that they can make a lot of money. That just shows you how sick some of the cultures around the world are, and how sick some elements in our own culture are. We have to push against it. Liberty's Voice on Rumble and YouTube. We're counting on you. And many more. We'll be right back. It's time for a little spring cleaning, and I know where to start. Go drag your old, dated wireless contract out of the closet and beat it with a broom. Then freshen things up by switching to Pure Talk, my wireless company that gives you unlimited talk, text, and plenty of data, just $25 a month, with no contract, no cancellation fees, and no overseas customer service if you ever need help. I'm guessing you're going to like them as much as my listener Paul from Greer, South Carolina. He says, I finally listened to Mark Levin's advice and switched from Verizon. I'm getting the very same service for less than half of what I was paying Verizon. You know, I long wondered if these much lower services could provide the same level of service as the big boys. Now I know that Pure Talk certainly can. Thank you, Paul. Now it's time for you folks to make the switch, too. Go to puretalk.com/Levin, puretalk.com/Levin, and you'll save 50% off your first month. That's puretalk.com/Levin, and switch to a wireless company that shares your values. Pure Talk, America's wireless company.
Nobody says it better than Mark Levin.
I'll go with what Mark Levin said, because nobody could say it better.
Call in now at 877-381-3811.
All right, everybody, I want to make you the smartest people around. A constitutionalist. So when you watch these buffoons, these clowns, these morons, who we call members of Congress, or their media mouthpieces tell you about the declaration of war provision in Article 1, you'll know the facts. Now, I've tried this many times, and so I've posted this. I tried it this way now. Ready? Our framers of the Constitution were so brilliant and prescient. What you see right now occurring in Congress is precisely why the delegates at the Constitutional Convention did not confer war powers on Congress. I repeat, did not confer war powers on Congress. In fact, the delegates specifically changed the original draft of the Constitution from Congress having the power to make war to the power to declare war. That is, Congress was granted the authority to declare its support for war, not declare war as a condition of making war or going to war. Let me repeat that. Congress was granted the authority to declare its support for war, not declare war as a condition of making war or going to war, which belongs to the president. And it is precisely why declarations of war have never been determinative in whether war is made or not since the beginning of the Republic. Let me repeat that. It is precisely why declarations of war have never been determinative in whether war is made or not since the beginning of the Republic. There have been 11 declarations, most of them during World War II. The last one in 1942. Next point. It is also why Congress cannot force the commander-in-chief, the president, to go to war by the act of declaring war. Again, Congress cannot force the commander-in-chief to go to war by the act of declaring war. Now, I've made these points before, but I wanted to make them as clearly and succinctly as I can. In other words, let's say Congress votes, we declare war against Bolivia. You know what the president could say? Well, you know what? Go to hell. I'm not getting involved in that. It's meaningless, in other words. So the arguments you're hearing by the Democrats, the arguments you're hearing by some phony constitutionalists and professors, the arguments you're hearing by the partisans who are trying to sabotage our military operation, who are trying to sabotage our righteous campaign to destroy the Islamo-Nazi regime and all of their nukes in Iran, is bullcrap. They're liars, and some of them know it. Some of them are too stupid, and they just go along. When I heard Schumer say today, you can't go to war without authorization from Congress, of course you can. If Congress wants to use the power of the purse under Article 1 to stop it, they can try. But what about the War Powers Act of 1973? Tell me. This is a smart audience after all these years. Does a statute change the Constitution? An amendment changes the Constitution. They can't get an amendment to the Constitution, so in 1973, the Democrats pushed through the War Powers Act. And it's got some triggers in there and so forth, but it's utterly unconstitutional. You want to change the relationship between Article 1 and Article 2? Then you amend the Constitution. You don't pass some phony-ass law. But even there, the president has complied with it within 48 hours to give notice to what they call the Gang of Eight. They did it, and they've been giving notice and notice, now to the entire Congress. Can you imagine if the framers believed that the president cannot act without Congress's affirmative approval? All 535 of them? You're going to have a public debate? You're going to be able to keep secrets and protect our armed forces? You're going to be able to take advantage of secrecy to attack the enemy? The framers were smart. They had just fought a revolutionary war. They knew that was stupid. So, of course, they didn't do it. We have Operation Epic Fury. But the Democrats have Operation Sabotage going on. They are involved in Operation Sabotage, while we have men and women in uniform in a war theater, while they are doing God's work, while they're protecting us, liberating the Persians, working side by side with the Israelis, and now, by the way, half the Arab world, to take a cancer, a metastasizing cancer. You heard Steve Witkoff in hour one. What his revelations, I thought, were stunning. Didn't you, Mr. Producer? Absolutely stunning. And we're going to have that recording, and we're going to put it out online very soon. I'll put it up during the break then. It's up on Twitter and everywhere right now, I'm told. But we'll push it out to other sources, and we'll see if they even use it. Those that lean Democrat, those who are of the left, that is, most of the media won't want it because it undermines their narrative. It's an illegal war. What was the immediacy? Blah, 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 you know. We even had Hakeem Jeffries say these people died, these heroes, in a losing war. He already declared that our war is lost. Did you hear that, Mr. Producer? This guy is disgusting, this Hakeem Jeffries. He is a disgusting fraud and phony. My interview with Steve Witkoff is on all our social sites. It's on Twitter and True Social and wherever we are, everywhere. It's on Rumble. It's on YouTube. And I strongly encourage you to share that with as many people as you can, because it lays out the case for the 4,000th time, but with massively new revelations about why we had to go to war with Iran. That there was nothing left to negotiate. That they were deceiving us, and in the course of deceiving us, Witkoff and Kushner, they learned that they were close to bomb-grade material within a week or 10 days, right in front of them. And the enemy bragged about it. And more than that, that the so-called civilian use had surpassed the 3.67% to 20%, and they were stockpiling that. And the only reason you stockpile that is to get it to 60 and then 90%, which they could have done in 4 to 6 weeks. And the revelation that really was remarkable to me is when Steve Witkoff told us, so they would have had upwards of 25 to 30 nuclear bombs in the course of a few months. Despite us hitting their main industrial centers, they had other things going on that they had stockpiled on silver. You have to understand, people are finally looking at a map. Iran is bigger than Alaska. It is a huge country. There's a lot of places to hide things. And some of it will escape scrutiny. Very important. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
It's time for a little spring cleaning, and I know where to start. Go drag your old, dated wireless contract out of the closet and beat it with a broom. Then freshen things up by switching to Pure Talk, my wireless company that gives you unlimited talk, text, and plenty of data, just $25 a month, with no contract, no cancellation fees, and no overseas customer service if you ever need help. I'm guessing you're going to like them as much as my listener Paul from Greer, South Carolina. He says, I finally listened to Mark Levin's advice and switched from Verizon. I'm getting the very same service for less than half of what I was paying Verizon. You know, I long wondered if these much lower services could provide the same level of service as the big boys. Now I know that Pure Talk certainly can. Thank you, Paul. Now it's time for you folks to make the switch, too. Go to puretalk.com/Levin, puretalk.com/Levin, and you'll save 50% off your first month. That's puretalk.com/Levin, and switch to a wireless company that shares your values. Pure Talk, America's wireless company. Ladies and gentlemen, one person is being prosecuted for attempting to assassinate Donald Trump. Another person escaped, but they are in Iran. We hopefully will get him for trying to assassinate Donald Trump, too. And the Department of Justice has laid out the case, Iran's involvement, and so forth. I don't normally play Tucker Carlson's podcast, but you need to hear how low this man has sunk. And you need to hear who he blames. At this point, if you're still a fan of his and following him, you're going to follow him right off the edge of the cliff. This is a very, very sick person. Cut to go.
Let's start with the purported assassination attempts on Donald Trump. Now, why are those significant? Because yesterday, the President of the United States said, I did this, and by this I mean killed the head of state of Iran, the Ayatollah Khamenei. He tried to kill me twice, but I got him first. It's almost a verbatim quote from the president, who thinks that. He's been told that. Get it. What do we know about that? Where did that intelligence come from that proved that the government of Iran, run by the Ayatollah, this religious leader, tried to assassinate the president of the United States twice? Do we know where that came from? Oh, it came from Israel. That's where that intel came from. Well, let's see it. Why not? At this point, he's dead. Why can't we see that? Oh, sources and methods? Tough. We went to war over this. Americans are dead because of this. You can't hide behind that anymore. Show us. And maybe we'll find that there's really good intel. And it just absolutely shows that the government of Iran, run by the Ayatollah, tried to assassinate the president of the United States. That might have been a good reason for war right there. But maybe it doesn't show that, because this country has certainly been manipulated a lot by Israeli intelligence.
So the Israelis did it. The Jews did it. This man is incredibly sick. In my view, mentally unhinged. He's got more hate in his soul than I've ever seen. This peddling of neo-Nazi conspiracy theories, Klansmen arguments about World War II, the platforming of some of the most hideous people, phony historians, and day in and day out this constant drumbeat about Jews in Israel, Christian Zionists. It's clear the President of the United States has had enough of them. But to support the enemy, the Islamist Nazi regime in Iran, to claim that it is Israel and the Mossad that's behind everything, when it's provably false. And even the predicate that he lays, that Rubio said that Israel dragged us into this war, That's not what Rubio said. They took 2 sentences out of what he said. Rubio has spent the whole day explaining that. The President of the United States has explained it twice today. That's not correct. The President of the United States said, in fact, he made the decision and he pulled Israel into the initial attack. I don't know if we have that or not. Mr. Producer, are you there? Yeah. Cut 4, go.
Mr. President, did Israel force your hand to launch these strikes against Iran? Did Netanyahu pull the United States into this war?
No, I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack. If we didn't do it, they were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that. And we have great negotiators, great people that do this very successfully and have done it all their lives very successful. And based on the way the negotiation was going, I think they were going to attack first. And I didn't want that to happen. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand. But Israel was ready and we were ready, and we've had a very, very powerful impact.
Rubio, cut 3, go.
Yesterday, you told us that Israel was going to strike Iran and that's why we needed to get involved. Today, the president said that Iran was going to get.
Yeah, your statement is false. So that's not what I was asked very specifically. Were you there yesterday?
Yes, I asked a question.
No, were you the one because somebody asked me a question yesterday, did we go in because of Israel? And I said, you were asking me that, you from that follow-up. And I said, no. I told you this had to happen anyway. The president made a decision, and the decision he made was that Iran was not going to be allowed to hide behind its ballistic missile program, that Iran was not going to be allowed to hide behind its ability to conduct these attacks. That decision had been made. The president systematically made a decision to systematically destroy this terroristic capability that they had, and we carried that out. I was very clear in that answer. This was a question of timing, of why this had to happen as a joint operation, not the question of the intent. Once the president made a decision that negotiations were not going to work, that they were playing us on the negotiations, and that this was a threat that was untenable, the decision was made to strike them. That's what I said yesterday, and you guys need to play it. If you're going to play these statements, you need to play the whole statement, not clip it to reach a narrative that you want to do, all right?
And yet they only played a small part of the clip. Over at National Review, Philip Klein, one of the few remaining honest writers and reporters, he explained that in the piece that he wrote. But over at the Federalist, they misled people, and other publications, some of which are supposedly conservative, but definitely the left media as well. They keep twisting this, as did Katarlson, as did Meager Kelly, as did everybody else who wants you to believe that the reason the President of the United States has taken this action is because of the Jewish conspiracy. And I'm so damn sick of this. We have men and women in harm's way, fighting a war, a righteous war, a noble war, to protect us, we red-blooded Americans. And these isolationists, these neo-Nazis, these Marxists and the Islamists, they want you to turn on the president and turn on our armed forces. Ain't gonna happen.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, America. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. Well, CENTCOM, that's us, just called the United States Air Force and the Israeli Air Force, the USAF and the IAF, quote, the two most powerful air forces in the world. And in the case of Israel, you're talking about a nation of 9 or 10 million people, but they take those jets that they purchase from us and they up the technology on them significantly, and then they give them back to us. Billions of dollars worth of research and technological advances, because they need the jets to go further and they need the jets to carry heavier payloads because they don't have as many. And when they develop that, they give it to us I know what the president said, but I know for a fact, because I was in the Reagan administration, that we were talking about the Strategic Defense Initiative, and the left and the media mocked Reagan about Star Wars, as they always do, our good guys, you know. And the Democrats in Congress repeatedly slash funding, but the Israelis came to us. We signed a memorandum of understanding. They wanted to use the basic platform idea, and they developed their own technology, which is now Iron Dome, and they have 2 other layers as well. All of that technology has been shared with us. The Israelis are far ahead. If you've listened to this program, you know, on laser technology to weaponize it. And they put it in the field. It's still at a very nascent stage, but it was working. It was knocking drones out of the sky, so that's going to be a big deal. And they're sharing that technology with us as well. So, yes, we do get something out of that investment. Every president has known that. Every Pentagon chief has known that. But I think the relationship today between Trump and Netanyahu, we've never seen anything like this before. Never. And those 2 air forces, as CENTCOM said, the 2 most powerful air forces on the face of the earth, they are coordinating with each other. They're sharing data with each other. They're deciding on missions with each other, who is better positioned to do X, Y, and Z. It's a coordination like we've never seen before. Technology like we've never seen before. People say we don't want boots on the ground. Well, we don't, if we can avoid it. I hear the isolationists try to use that as an excuse. They're all over TV. Bunch of numbskulls, really. We know we don't want troops on the ground if that's possible. But what makes it possible not to have troops on the ground is this massive technological advantage that we create and the Israelis create. The type of missile technology, defensive and offensive, the kind of data that these missiles retain and can have, and the communication systems, it's absolutely unbelievable. Unbelievable. And the Israelis, I've been reading it in the paper, are now building military alliances and selling some advanced weaponry, not all of it for sure, with the Indian government. India has the greatest population in the world, the biggest. And can you imagine the Germans? We know what happened in Germany. The Germans are buying defensive missile technology from the Israelis. And on and on and on. And we work with the Israelis, they work with us, and they give us whatever technological advances or improvements they make on our own equipment. It is a wonderful relationship. So the people who try to come between us and them, or Netanyahu and Trump, are diabolical. They're anti-American. We share the same Judeo-Christian belief system, the same belief in a democratic government, the same belief in life over death. This thing about Israel drawing us into the war, the twisting of Rubio's words, where he sets it straight, the president sets it straight, everybody, they don't want it set straight because they're liars. That's why. They have an agenda. Here's Netanyahu on Fox News with Hannity last night. Cut 5, go.
There are people that say, well, the prime minister of Israel dragged Donald Trump into it. And as somebody that's been friends with him over 30 years, nobody drags Donald Trump into anything.
Wait a minute, I didn't know Sean was friends with Trump over 30 years. I guess that's possible. Go ahead.
Reaction to that.
Well, you're right. I mean, that's ridiculous. Donald Trump is the strongest leader in the world. He does what he thinks is right for America. He does also what he thinks is right for future generations. And frankly, we're partners in that effort because I've devoted my life to securing the life of the one and only Jewish state. And believe me, it's been a struggle. I've known the pangs of war. I lost a brother in war and in battle. I myself fought terrorists and was wounded in liberating hostages from a hijacked plane. I held a fellow soldier in my arms when I was 18, and he died in my arms.
I know the cost of war, but I know sometimes that war is necessary to protect us from the people who would destroy us. And that's what free societies have to understand. Freedom is precious, but it has to be protected. And we have to understand that we're fighting here. We're fighting here the bad guys. We're the good guys. These people massacred their own people. Imagine what they would do, these people who chant death to America, if they had the ballistic missiles and the nuclear warheads to deliver to every American city.
You know, that was a point I made, and I noticed that everybody's making that now, and I think that's very important to understand. And my point was, a week ago, if you're going to kill 50,000 of your own people in the blink of an eye, you can understand that they'd kill 1 million of their own people, and they certainly wouldn't hesitate to shoot nuclear missiles into our country. So Senator Mark Warner, you notice the sort of the coalescing of the left and the Democrats with the woke right neo-fascists. But they have to lie because they're wrong. We're right and they're wrong. So Mark Warner is really a feckless, incompetent, moronic senator. He bought himself a governorship, then he bought himself a Senate seat. And so he's interviewed on CNN yesterday and continues with this stuff. That the Jews dragged us into this. That Israel dragged us into this. That Netanyahu dragged us into this. Cut 6, go.
So he's saying that the United States says they knew that Israel was going to strike and that Iran in response would retaliate in part against the United States. And so therefore the United States needed to come with Israel and strike first.
So what Aaron Burnett and CNN do is they cut off the full comments that Rubio made. And that's why he was admonishing the CNN reporter who started this whole thing, I believe, and said, if you're going to play a clip, play the entirety so the context is there rather than cherry pick that creates a completely different conclusion. And that's what they did. And so the administration had been pushing back and pushing back and pushing back since yesterday. And so Aaron Burnett, not exactly known as an objective, serious journalist, she spews it. And then, of course, it's a grapefruit thrown over the plate for Mark Warner, who has spent an entire career, an entire life, as a psycho liar. Cut 6, go.
Logic, as he has laid it out, makes sense.
Well, does it make sense if we are going to outsource our foreign policy decisions and choices to another government?
Listen, so stop there. So he will never be called on this. She will never be called on this. They will never apologize to the president. They will never apologize to the Secretary of State. They'll never apologize to the Prime Minister. This psychobabble, this intentional lying to the American people when we have men and women in the battlefield. They don't give a damn. They just don't care. Go ahead.
Extraordinarily strong supporter of Israel. But do I want
No, you're not, a-hole. You're not even a strong supporter of your own country, the United States of America. We know what you are, and we know who you are. You're a phony and a fraud. Go ahead.
Making the decision of when and where.
So look at the drama. Another government tells us when and where to go to war. No, they didn't. Trump would never do that. I don't know of any president who would do that. I don't know that Netanyahu would ask any president to do that. This is so outrageous. And so the president has said, and I played it earlier, actually, we kind of pulled the Israelis into moving when we wanted to move. So the opposite is true. But the truth never catches up with these bald-faced serial liars. It just doesn't happen. Now you got Jeff Merkley, Democrat, Oregon. All the Democrats have their propaganda down. They want us to lose this war because they think it'll give them political advantage. They think it'll give them the midterms and the 2028 presidency. They want us to lose. They absolutely do. They're trying to throw legal impediments. Look at this propaganda. The enemy could be using this propaganda. Perhaps they are at this point. They're using Tucker Carlson's podcast on state-run Iranian media. We've reached a point in our country that we literally have a political party that hates the country, wants power at any cost, and that power means the Republicans have to lose, Donald Trump has to lose, and we have to lose a war. Go ahead. Let's do cut 7.
That is a profoundly disturbing explanation. First, Netanyahu came and asked for American support for...
By the way, this is CNN pushing this all day. Netanyahu, they hate Netanyahu. But they hate Zionism. And they hate Jews. They just don't really come out and say it, you see. They'll get to that point. They'll get to the Tucker Carlson point. They'll get to the Candace Owens point. They'll get to the Megyn Kelly point. They'll get to the Bannon point. They're just way ahead of the bigots and the anti-Semites, you see. Go ahead.
Indicating that they wouldn't be acting unless America supported it. So that just violates what Rubio just said. That
this guy's a word salad. He's a useless moron, but he's a left-wing Democrat. And that's all you have to be to get elected in Oregon these days. That's it. Portland is the tail that wags the dog. And Portland is a disaster. Democrat city, run by a bunch of clowns. I feel bad for the people who don't vote for these clowns and are stuck in jobs and maybe homes that they have. Or they like there because there's generations of them. But it's just like New York. You got Mondami. Half the city didn't vote for him, but they have to deal with his crap. They have to deal with it. And it goes on and on and on. The Democrats trying to create confusion. What's the mission? The hell's the mission? To take out the enemy. That's the mission, you damn bastards. What do you think it is? What's the mission? Violation of the law. Netanyahu got us in it. They just keep throwing it against the wall. They never say, we want to wish our armed forces the best. We want to celebrate them. They're doing a fantastic job. Absolutely incredible. We're defeating this maniacal enemy that's been trying to kill us, has killed many Americans, civilians and military, that wants to get nuclear weapons and blow us off the face of the earth. We have the greatest military on the face of the earth, working with a tremendous ally. You never hear them say anything like this. Never. Even most of the Arab states are with us now. Qatar, which of course has caused great depression, with Tucker Carlson and his Nimrod brother, Buckley. They shouldn't call him Buckley. It should be Gore Vidal. Gore Vidal, Carlson. Yes. Yes, indeed. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Don't forget Liberty's Voice at Rumble and at YouTube. It's a big one. You're going to like it. You might get into a routine. It's only 3 days a week, 40 to 45 minutes, 3 days a week. Liberty's Voice, Rumble, YouTube. Our interview with Steve Witkoff, which is really a newsbreaker in so many respects, is all on our social media. You can go over to Twitter, or X as we call it. It's posted there, and Truth Social and so forth and so on. So if you haven't heard it, you're really going to want to listen to it, and you're definitely going to want to share it because it makes it clear why we had to go to war with these people. There's no question about it. All right. I try to make this radio show, all 3 hours, my new video podcast, 45 minutes. Life, Liberty, and Levin. 2 hours a week, 1 hour Saturday, 1 hour Sunday, as meaningful and substantive and knowledgeable, interesting, entertaining as possible. I don't come in here and paint by the numbers like too many do. I enjoy this format. I take it very seriously, and I'm very, very blessed you're here. We've got a full half hour left, even though this show is flying. You might want to check out that Steve Witkoff recording and spread it around to your friends and family. We'll be right back.
Liberty's voice, Mark Levin. Talk with that voice now. 877-381-3811.
You know, America, I posted a criticism of one of the Liberal Party leaders in Israel. His name is Lapid. And it's because he put out a video about 2 days or so ago. And he was prime minister for about 14 minutes, along with Bennett, who was prime minister for about 12 minutes after him. They put together sort of an odd coalition, included Arab parties. This guy Bennett is a real, he's being pushed by some people to replace Netanyahu, but he's really, in my view, very much a chameleon, because he tells conservatives that he would not join a coalition with the Arab parties. The Arab parties are very hostile to Israel, as you can imagine. But then he went ahead and did it. And now he's trying to put together a center-right coalition to go after Netanyahu. And so this guy, Lapid, is head of one of the liberal parties, but they're relatively small, but together they can make a lot of noise, and they have a coalition. So they put out this video praising, as they should, President Trump and us for this fantastic, spectacular war effort. But he leaves out his own prime minister, Mr. Producer. How do you do that? Because they want to defeat him. Now, he put out a video and shook the prime minister's hand some weeks ago at the outbreak of this, and so we're all united, we're all Israelis and so forth and so on. But why would you do that? Well, he shouldn't have. So he wrote actually a very polite response to me. But then there's a guy by the name of, I think his name is Yitzhak Katz. Yitzhak Katz! Yitz! Now, I don't know this guy from a hole in the ground, but apparently he's one of Bennett's boys. He wrote a very nasty post. So I dismissed him. What, I'm going to get engaged with every one of these nasty sort of left of center, or he would argue he's center or right of center, but they can argue whatever they want. One of these nasty guys who hates Netanyahu and starts attacking Netanyahu. Well, what about October 7th? What is this guy, an idiot? A moron? So I just dismissed him. Why engage that? Lapid, to my surprise, was actually fairly classy. This guy Katz was the opposite of classy. But Lapid is a lefty. And God forbid if he had been the prime minister during all of this, bowing to Biden's demands and all the rest of it. Now, what they have now with our country, their prime minister and our president, is once in generations. Once in generations. It's absolutely the case. Thought you might find that interesting. All right, let's take a couple of calls. Let's go to John, Dallas, Texas, the great WBAP. John, how are you?
Doing well. How are you, Mark?
Very well, thank you.
Mark, first things first, I want to, from the bottom of my heart, give you the accolades that you are due. The knowledge and wisdom that you share nightly for free on your radio program and through your television programs and so on is spectacular. It's invaluable. And I think there's millions of us out here, and not everybody gets through. That you've got a long list of people that need to talk to you, but I want to make sure to speak for many of us out here. That thank you so much for everything you do. I mean, it's just absolutely tremendous effort that you put in each week, or each day.
I couldn't do it without you guys. You stop listening, stop supporting the sponsors. You're off to Wizard of Oz land. But thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also agree with what you were just mentioning a minute ago. We are in a once in a generation kind of situation. The people of Israel are tremendously blessed by having a leader like Netanyahu right now. in charge of everything. And same for the United States, although we, as you know, we've got a big hate America crowd with the Democrats and so on.
Oh, yeah.
But we are tremendously blessed as well to have Donald Trump as our
Amen.
leader at this time.
Amen.
You know, we suffered through so many years of Obama, Biden appeasement and giving them billions of dollars and just all of the nonsense that had gone on for so long. And we've been dealing with this pain in our side for decades now in Iran. And so that evil regime had to go. And it was only, as you know, a matter of time before they would attack us. It was coming.
This is the thing that gets me. They say, why now? No, the question is, why not now? Now, if you heard Steve Witkoff, and you can play it for your friends now, we've downloaded it. It's on all my social sites. You can link to it. I don't make anything out of it. I just want people to listen to the facts. He said, look, these guys had all this weapons-grade uranium, this fissile material, at 60% that they had stored away, away from these nuclear sites. They admitted it, and they had an enormous amount of it. And they're bragging there at the table on the first negotiation. There were 3 meetings, telling them we have enough to make 11 bombs. Enough right now to make 11 bombs. And it is our right, our unalienable right, to be able to do it and to be able to keep these materials. And that's just one of the revelations Witkoff gave us. He gave us many revelations beyond what he discussed last night, because we had more time here, 45 minutes. I would encourage people to listen to this. Again, it's on my Twitter account. It's on True Social. It's everywhere. And I want to encourage you to take the time and listen to this, because these are the facts. And now nobody can say, Democrats or media, that they haven't heard the facts, because these are the first time, not all, but most of these revelations have been made. He wanted to come on. He wanted to talk to me. He wanted to talk to this audience about these things. And, of course, I was more than happy. But he lays it out. Donald Trump really did want a deal. He wanted a deal. But there was nothing to deal, because they kept slamming the door. They wouldn't put it down in writing so they could take the information back to the Pentagon or the CIA or even the President of the United States. They were supposed to give a written offer the second meeting. They didn't even give it the third meeting. They gave them some paragraphs for them to look at and then took it back. It was utterly unserious. He could see they had no power, he and Jared Kushner. They briefed the President of the United States, and the President of the United States decided, okay, well, we got to do what we got to do. And he's coming under attack for this, for protecting the American people. For protecting the American people, he's coming under attack. It is so outrageous what these Democrats have become. And I just want people to take note of this. It's outrageous what these Democrats are doing and what these Democrats have become, period. All right, brother, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your call. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
I want you to listen to Tom Tillis today. I guess he thinks he's a tough guy, screaming at Kristi Noem. It made me sick to my stomach. Now, I've known a lot of people who were secretaries of DHS. There's nobody who's been better than her. Nobody. Cut 23, go.
Why am I disappointed with Secretary Noem? Because we're not going after enough people who did this damage at the expense of running numbers that Stephen Miller wants out of the White House. We just want numbers. We want 1,000 a day, 6,000 a day, 9,000 a day, because numbers matter, right? No, they don't matter. Quality matters, not quantity, quality. And what we've seen is a disaster. Under your leadership, Ms. Noem, a disaster. What we've seen is innocent people getting detained that turn out are American citizens. I could talk about the culture that's been created here with Stephen Miller aiding and abetting. I heard first reports that he was the one that said it was a domestic terrorist situation where 2 people lost their lives in Minneapolis. I've heard that report. Maybe you can refute it. I don't know that we'll have time for you to respond.
Shut up, you idiot. Shut up, you moron, you lame duck schmuck. No wonder the North Carolinians don't want you anymore. You're a loser. But then I was surprised by John Kennedy, usually thoughtful and wise and funny. He was awful today, spinning a corruption scenario, going after Kristi Noem. You know, none of these lard asses could do that job. Not one of them could do that damn job. Listen to this. Cut 27. Go.
How do you square that concern for waste, which I share, with the fact that you have spent $220 million running television advertisements that feature you prominently?
Sir, the president tasked me with getting the message out to the country and to other countries where we were seeing the invasion come from, with putting commercials out that told them that if they were in this country illegally, that they needed to leave or we would detain them and remove them.
So let's stop it. Is this really an important question? When we have illegal aliens in this country, when ICE is under attack, he wants you to believe that he's raising this issue. No, it's somebody, him or somebody who fed this to him. I've been around long enough, who doesn't like Kristi Noem, so he's attacking her for self-promotion, $200 million worth. Now, what's interesting about the Department of Homeland Security, it used to be INS, is we used to spend in the Reagan administration far more money than any other department in going public. Why? Because you need public eyes, because you got to communicate with migrants, you got to communicate with illegal aliens, you got to tell them where you stand, what's going on. So you spend more money. You have to spend more money. And in her case, she's the head of a department that has TSA, the INS. So many agencies were dumped in the Department of Homeland Security. And she's doing a hell of a job. So she's under attack by Tillis because she's doing a hell of a job. And he says she's basically a toady for Miller. Who's doing a hell of a job? These are Republicans. And then she has to hear from Kennedy, why are you promoting yourself with hundreds of millions of dollars in ads? Really? Seriously? While the Democrats shut down half her department? Cut 28, go.
What got my attention was that you blamed those statements on Mr. Stephen Miller at the White House. Did you not?
No, sir, I did not. And in fact,
let's stop here. He's talking about her blaming the domestic terrorist phrase on Stephen Miller at the White House. This is a U.S. senator. That is a serious department. It's worth about $200 million. It spends tens of billions. And it's got internal security requirements, Secret Service, TSA, the border, ICE, the Border Patrol. It's got the Coast Guard. It's got all kinds of things. And you're going to ask a question? You got 7 minutes or whatever it is about whether you threw somebody under the bus over a phrase? Is that it? You know what that is? That's a hit. Somebody wanted him to do it, and he did it. Shame on these two Republican senators. They should have spent a lot of time asking questions like this. Madam Secretary, the Democrats have shut down FEMA, TSA, the Coast Guard, and other agencies that are critical to our security. Air security, border security, particularly at a time like this when we may have Iranian terrorist agents in the country. What do you want to tell them? Why wouldn't you pursue that, for God's sakes? This is why people hate politicians. I'm quite serious about this. You're going to spend your time on an oversight hearing on this? Seriously? Apparently so. Check out Liberty's Voice, our fantastic new video podcast at Rumble and YouTube. God bless each and every one of you. It is my honor to be here with you. And check out that Steve Witkoff recording. You should spread that to incredible revelations. See you tomorrow.